Glenn Beck.
The Blaze Radio Network.
Yesterday on the program, we had Michael Malice. He is an amazing guy. He actually was born in the Soviet Union. His parents defected in the 70s, and he got out. And so he has been struggling with things. He's also Jewish, struggling with things like modern-day concentration camps and the evils of communism and totalitarianism. Yesterday, we talked to him about Korea on a high level. He went over to North Korea and really got to know some of the people and the culture. And it's a terrifying place. I wanted to invite him back today because I wanted to talk to him about, life in this former Soviet Union, because I don't think people even understand how free we are today. But I also wanted to talk to him about something that, if the media really cares about the people of North Korea and the people of South Korea, then they would be doing things like what I'm going to ask him to do. Tell us about the concentration camps that are happening currently in North Korea. Michael, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much, Glenn. Man, this is going to be a dark day on the Glenn Beck show because, we're starting with that sad opener, and I'm about to make it even darker. So hang
on just a second. I want you to know that wasn't a sad opener. I think that was a mirror. They're miracles. People provide miracles.
Touching. Very, very, very touching and intense. In the North Korean concentration camps, as we discussed yesterday, they send your whole family, 3 generations. The leader of North Korea, the founder, Kim Il-sung, said class enemies must be exterminated to 3 generations. So when you get sent to the camps, you still have to work. And you have a quota. And what's insane, even by concentration camp standards, if you kill yourself, your family still has to fill your quota. So even death is not an escape in these camps from the reach of the Kim dynasty. There are children there, men and women, and you hear these stories of, for example, it is illegal to have relations with the camp guards. So very often these women are assaulted by the guards who have complete power over them, but then the women are the ones who are punished. There was this one story where a woman was assaulted. They ran her over with a truck, cut off her legs, and she still had to report to work, pushing herself on a tire. They're not going to give her a wheelchair. You have stories where even in the camps, they can punish you. So you have men sentenced to work in mines, and they never see sunlight again. So their skin starts to slough off from vitamin D deficiency. So this is a level of barbarism that has almost never been seen on Earth. And so much of the press is focused on how fat Kim Jong-un is and his rhetoric. And I was so pleased to hear you talk about this yesterday, and this is why I wrote Dear Reader, so that people can realize the focus is on 25 million slaves in this country. And so much of the rhetoric in the press is like, well, it's better that they die than we die. And it's like, well, how about we figure out a way where no one dies? That's my goal.
Michael, I don't know how to solve this. And I think some people tune this out, the press, because they don't think anybody wants to watch it or pay attention to it, which I think is just total laziness. It's your job to figure out a way to present it in such a way that you can feed it to people. That's your job. And instead, Go ahead.
Well, that's why I wrote my book, because it was driving me nuts that you see people completely uninformed on television making these claims, making it like another Iraq or another Nazi Germany, and it's not. And I said, I'm going to do something about this once and for all. And I'm going to write a book so people can understand how it got to this place. It didn't happen overnight, Glenn, as you know. This was a long, methodical process to take a population and reduce them to this state.
Michael Malice is the name of the author, and the book is Dear Reader, The Unauthorized Autobiography of Kim Jong-il. How do you? It's in some ways, in a different way. So hear me out on this question. When we went in and we freed the concentration camps of the Germans, some at the very beginning, our help actually killed them. By feeding, it killed them. I mean, it's a it was a horrible situation. And so we had to be really, really careful on how to bring people back to health. How do you, for people who have been in a concentration camp for 3 generations, how do you bring those people back to any kind of understanding of how people should even be treated?
Well, what's even more insane is that when North Koreans send people to the camps, sometimes those people are freed and they return to North Korean society. They have to basically sign a non-disclosure agreement, and they have to try to pick up the pieces of their lives. So there have been instances of this where people have been returned, but they're obviously broken human beings. And there's different types of camps. There's political camps and there's work camps, because one of the things these totalitarian nations have the idea, you remember the slogan over Auschwitz was "work makes you free." They claim and they believe in North Korea that by working, you will learn to love the leader and you will work your way to kind of enlightenment and understanding the Juche idea, which is the philosophy that guides North Korea. So it's so depraved in so many ways, but thankfully, there are stories of people who had the book that really moved George W. Bush is called The Aquariums of Pyongyang. And this is the book that really blew the lid off of the camp system, because the family went to live in the camps and they were freed. And then one of the guys became a refugee, and he told the stories of what's going on there. And more people are escaping North Korea and telling the stories of what life is like in these camps. So but here's the scary part. The people in the camps are told, should the Americans invade, we are going to kill you all and burn these camps down. And that's something that no one takes into account when they're advocating starting war with North Korea.
How many people are estimated to be in these camps? 100
to 200,000, and you can see them for yourself on Google Earth.
What do I Google?
I mean, just go to Google Maps. I forgot, just Google North Korea concentration camps. You'll find it pretty quickly. Maybe not using Google, maybe another search engine these days.
And there's no doubt that the North Koreans would slaughter them. I mean, that's what the Germans tried to do. They just didn't have enough time. I mean, you have to erase these crimes against humanity.
Of course. That's the other point you made yesterday. Everyone talks about they're crazy. They're crazy. They're not crazy. They're evil. They're smart and they're conniving. And exactly like you said, they want to wash their hands out of these crimes against humanity. And that means murdering at a huge scale. During the 90s, they refused to allow food into the country, and up to 10% of the population starved, 1 to 2 million people, because Kim Jong-il, the father, said, if we let the UN give them food, they're going to not need the government. And the people who are the most loyal to the regime were the first to starve, because they were the ones thinking food's right around the corner. I believe in the leader. It's the shady ones and the cynical ones who were like, I'm going to lie, cheat, and steal to feed my family, who survived.
Michael Malice is on with us. MichaelMalice.com. Also, the book is Dear Reader, The Unauthorized Biography of Kim Jong-il. We'll talk a little bit more about North Korea and what to do there, but also want to hear his story, life behind the Iron Curtain. His parents came to the West to escape the Soviet Union. How about we actually have a real adult conversation about what we're doing?
And we've been a very adult so far, and it's understandable with the context of the times. Though, Michael, your book is really entertaining. I don't want that to be lost in like a really serious topic here, because you made the choice to write it as Kim Jong-il.
It's in the first person, and I wanted to be the kind of book you can read in the beach and or bathroom, right? Because unless you make things fun and entertaining and kind of a page turner, it's so dark and so depressing, people shut down. So I thought, let's make this something that people can enjoy. And one of the reviews I got, it just really hit me, was, this is the funniest and most terrifying book I've ever read.
That's great.
Because
it's great. Mission accomplished.
I'm sure a lot of your audience have seen the movie The Incredibles, and they talk in that movie about how supervillains gloat and they go on their monologues. So when you read their literature, they boast about all the things that they do. And there is a sick kind of humor to it that, with a straight face, they're saying things that when you stop and think about it, you're like, this is madness.
Like what?
Well, for example, Kim Jong-il hates the Mona Lisa, I learned from reading their propaganda. And I asked my mother, who grew up in the Soviet Union, I'd say, why do you think Kim Jong-il hates the Mona Lisa? And it took her 1 second. She goes, because she has an ambiguous smile. And that's right. According to North Korea, if art is ambiguous, it's not art. Art has to have a propaganda message that's very clear to the masses, or else you can't consider it art. And imagine living in a country where every piece of art has to have some political message, and that political message is always the same.
I think I do live in that country. I hate to point that out, but I think we're there. Do the people there actually believe the stuff like, he came down and was born and was delivered by a flock of birds, and he remembers the day he was born?
That's the first line of the book. I remember the right. day. What is it? I remember the first day of the day I was born perfectly.
I remember the day that I was born perfectly.
And that it's not a funny statement where you're grandiose and overstating what Kim Jong-il said. He actually told people that, and they were really forced to believe it.
And I've heard that that he doesn't go to the bathroom. That people believe that he has no bathroom needs.
No, see, a lot of times the West gets it wrong, and let me explain how they view him. Right. What that bathroom line is, what they meant is he works so hard he doesn't even take breaks to go to the bathroom. So that's not really a big expression.
Okay.
However,
does he wear adult diapers? Or
I don't think we need to go there. Go ahead.
Yeah, but they look at him not like a person. They look at him kind of the way we look at Uncle Sam, right? Now, Uncle Sam, we know what he's like, what he does. If I asked you, well, if it's Uncle Sam, who are his nieces and nephews, you never stop to think about that, right? It doesn't make, but he's an uncle. So you don't perceive him as a full human being. However, there's another story which was amazing to me at how they view Kim Jong-il. There's a building, there's an obelisk in North Korea called the Tower of the Juche Idea. It's got this flame at the very top.
Hang on. We'll get the rest of this story, and maybe they should learn Uncle Sam wears stripes, meaning he should be in prison. Maybe they should learn that about their uncle as well. We'll get the rest of the story and then move to the former Soviet Union. What was life like for
this is the Glenn
Michael's
Beck
family
program. Mercury.
Glenn Beck.
The Blaze Radio Network.
So we're talking to Michael Malice. He is the author of a book called Dear Reader, the unauthorized biography of Kim Jong-il. His family immigrated here from the Soviet Union in the 1970s. We'll get into that here in just a second. But finishing up a story on how people view, the dear leader in North Korea. And you were talking about an obelisk?
Yeah, they have this tower, the Tower of the Juche Idea. It's the stone tower in the capital city of Pyongyang. And when you read their literature and how they discuss how this tower was being built, you have all these architects, and they came up with all these plans. And Kim Jong-il shows up and says, hey, why don't we make it the tallest tower in the world? And their jaws drop, and they realize no one had ever considered this possibility before. And it's like, wait a minute, you guys are all brainstorming with the dear leader, and no one even threw out, we should make it the biggest one on earth. So according to all their literature, it's not that he's a god. He's literally the only competent person in the whole country, and that's very pernicious because think about it, to this day, if that leader goes away, that means your whole nation goes to pot. So it's very important if the one guy who knows how to do anything in the country is keeping things together, you really want to make sure he stays in charge.
And Michael, they thought that the grandfather was actually working with the people, that he would be in the actual factories. And he wouldn't stop to eat or go to the bathroom. He would just keep working, and he would turn one factory around, and then the dear leader would get into another car and he'd race to another factory, and he was working there. I mean, they actually believed that.
Well, it's kind of it's kind of true. They have something called field guidance, and if you look in their newspapers, it's photographs of Kim Jong-il at one factory one day, and the next day he's at a school. So when I'm reading all the propaganda, the stories are mind-numbing because there's a glass factory, there's a problem, no one knows what to do. Kim Jong-il shows up. He has an extremely obvious solution. Everyone is shocked and amazed. The next day, we got a problem at the cornflake factory. Gee, I wonder what's going to happen there. So, trying to make it into a funny, interesting story was a lot of work on my part and what's really dark about their literature is other human beings and other countries don't exist. So it'll say something like, during the 70s, the great leader Kim Il-sung went to a European country to attend the funeral of its president. It doesn't say which country. It doesn't say who. No one else has names in most of these stories other than Kim Jong-il and Kim Il-sung. And they started even recently taking on a biblical bent by having everything the leaders say in boldface, in the same way Jesus' words are in red in the Bible, and their names are in a bigger font than the rest of the text.
Can you tell me because there's a lot of bizarre things that go on with North Korea that I don't understand, but let me just say two words to you. Dennis Rodman.
Oh, yes. I mean, Dennis Rodman, the hatred I have for him and what he is doing, and I don't care how drunk or stupid he is or crazy, he was on some Sunday morning show and they asked him, how are you palling around with someone who has concentration camps? And he literally said, well, we have prisons. What's the difference?
Oh, my gosh.
Why don't you go to those prisons and go to those camps and take a poll and see who wants to switch places, and you'll have your answer. So to hand wave that away, to me, is unconscionable.
What do you think it is? Is it money? And why is Kim Jong-un interested in him? I mean, because the rest of the world isn't interested in him.
Because how many celebrities are going to be his friend? You know what I mean? First of all, he gets to pretend to his population that everyone on Earth thinks I'm awesome. They don't know who Dennis Rodman is, but he can easily tell them this is the greatest basketball player of all time. And he's an American coming to North Korea to praise the leader. That says something else. So these are two aspects that are used to glorify the regime. Plus, I'm sure it makes Kim Jong-un look a lot smarter by comparison, right? And a lot saner. So
you're doing this, I gather, because of you're kind of picking up the torch where your parents kind of left off in some ways. Your parents and you for a couple of years lived in the former Soviet Union, and you saw persecution. You saw, concentration camps. You're Jewish. You saw history. I imagine that's where this is coming from. Oh, absolutely. Because when I would look at the reports, the news, and people treating it like a carnival, and, in high school, we ask ourselves, how do we let the Holocaust happen? People don't even talk about the gulags from the Soviet Union, which preceded the German concentration camps and were around for a lot longer. And again, to focus on Kim Jong-il's golf score, I said, I'm going to do something, I'm going to at least try to do something once and for all, because you can write books that are fun and entertaining, but at a certain point you're like, I put on this earth, let me see if I can move the needle a little bit. Because we have it pretty good in this country, Glenn. If I move the needle in America, it's not going to make much of a difference. But if I'm moving the needle even a little bit in North Korea, this could actually be saving a lot of lives. Tell me about your parents' experience in the Soviet Union. It was awful. And it's there's so many things that were put into my head that I didn't realize were put in there, and that is different from how Americans were raised. For example, I had a buddy staying in my house. I went to the gym, and to get into my apartment building, there's no buzzer. Someone has to let you in. And I come back, and he said, there was someone at the door looking for whatever, Jimmy, and I sent him on his way. And I looked at him, and I realized if I was staying in someone's house, it wouldn't even enter my head to answer the door. Like, that's not how Russians think. If there's a knock on the door, it's just not even an option. It doesn't compute, because it's just, there's so much lack of trust. And the other thing, the Google Doc very much was a Soviet kind of story, because I was always raised to always be aware of who has power over you and realize they might exercise that power for completely absurd reasons. And you have to be conscious of that
all the time. The idea that people are going to play fair with you when they're stronger than you is an absurdity in the Soviet psychology.
So, Michael, I went over to Poland. I took my family 4 years ago, went to Auschwitz, wanted my kids to see, I wanted them to see Israel with the first stop being Auschwitz, so they knew why Israel was important in today's world. They know the history of Israel. But I want them to understand what it's like when a people don't have a home to call their own to be able to defend themselves. And so we went over and I talked to one of the righteous among the nations, a sweet woman. And she was like 16 when she started saving Jews in the ghetto. And I asked her, the last thing I said to her was, Paulina, you know, if dark times come, I am looking to water the tree of righteousness in myself and my family and others. How do we do that? And she said something so profound. And as each day goes by and I see things like this Google Doc thing, it just becomes stronger and stronger. She said, you misunderstand. The righteous didn't suddenly become righteous. They just refused to go over the cliff with the rest of humanity. When you see the Google Docs and you see people cheering and saying we can't even have a reasonable conversation, we must deny things that we know are true. And we not only have to not say the things that we know are true, we must join the crowd and say the things we know are not true.
And if they had their druthers, this guy would not only not be working at Google, he'd never be working again.
Yes.
And for what? I mean, you judge people by their actions, not by their intent. And at the very least, first of all, no one's even claiming he had bad intentions.
No.
That's what's even more pernicious. It's not like he set out to write a document and, you know, it's like, I'm going to make people uncomfortable. This is his, let's suppose it's all wrong, but this is his scientific view. The kid went to Harvard.
And MIT.
And the thing is, this is no dummy. And you have people on Twitter, you know, who've never done anything with their lives, feeling free to cast judgment on his understanding of the scientific process and biology and psychology. So it's a very, very scary thing. However, I think there's a good side in the sense that thanks to social media and alternative forms of media, this is being exposed as soon as it happens. And back in the day, this kid could have been vanished and nothing, you'd never hear about him again. Remember, like Woodrow Wilson put Eugene V. Debs in jail.
Yep. Let me... do you hate Woodrow Wilson?
Oh, come on. You can't kiss up to him by bringing up Woodrow Wilson.
Do you hate him as much as I do? Fair. Are you like a big-time hater of Woodrow Wilson?
Oh, he's the worst.
Oh, my gosh, I love
the worst
you.
president of all time. Are you kidding?
Oh, I love you. So I have to tell you this, just off the... I just got an email from somebody who is going to make a cartoon on Woodrow Wilson, the evil of Woodrow Wilson. It'll blow you away, who is thinking about doing this. And they said, will you please be the narrator? They said, the people involved completely disagree, but there is no one that hates Woodrow Wilson more than us, other than you. And I said, oh my gosh, I will help you in every possible way to expose that monster. Yeah, he was
it's no coincidence he was a college university president.
Nope.
Because this is where I was on the show Kennedy on Fox Business, and I made the point. The university's job is to prepare young minds to be the shock troops for the progressive militia. They are there to program them and have them spread out like a virus and control the media and entertainment. What percent of journalists have gone to universities? And they're all being programmed by the evangelical left.
Michael, you just booked yourself a ticket for a third consecutive day on the
air. We could be best friends, Michael. Yeah, I don't know what else you believe, but you had me at Woodrow Wilson as evil.
We'll have you back on Monday.
Yeah. Going to be having dinner tomorrow and candlelight.
It's a real honor to talk to you, Michael, and thanks for all of the hard work and the hard thinking and heavy lifting on trying to get the words out in a way that people can consume them.
Thank you so much, Glenn.
Appreciate your work.
Thank you.
God bless. Michael Malice, the name of the book is Dear Reader, the unauthorized biography of Kim Jong-il. Why did you read that when it came out? This has been out for like 5 years. Why were you reading that?
It's just, I mean, I'm fascinated by dictators. And, you know, Kim Jong-un, in North Korea in particular, it's one of the places I desperately in my life want to go someday. Now, I'm obviously at this point, you go there and you die, so I really can't do it. But I would love to see it. It's an incredible
place. He won't go to
place.
Israel.
I know.
He won't go to Israel.
But he'd love to go to North Korea.
I'm also not going to North Korea because I think it's dangerous. I mean, I would love to see Israel too, but I think
I'm thinking about going to South Korea, not North Korea.
South Korea.
I'm thinking about going to the DMZ.
I would love to see that too. I mean, it's an incredible place, and that hotel that we talked about yesterday, the Hotel of Doom, is like legitimately my favorite building and story of all time, because I mean, it is the ultimate failure of communism. They when the Seoul, South Korea Olympics in 1988 were going on, they decided they wanted to outshow, because they knew the spotlight would be on South Korea, and they wanted to show they were better. So the communists tried. It was Kim Il-sung tried to build the largest hotel in the world. Got the structure built. It looks like this bizarre pyramid, almost like a rocket ship. It's 110 stories. They got through it.
Think of that. That's the World Trade Center.
Yeah, it's
in pyramid form.
In pyramid form. It is huge. And it's this big concrete structure. They built it to the sky and then ran out of cash. The Soviet Union started to collapse. They ran out of cash, couldn't finish it. So over this city that was supposed to be the best city in the world, and how they were dominating the world and in the economy and everything else, is this giant unfinished disaster that they can't do anything with, but they also can't tear it down, because it'd be completely unsafe to tear it down and also really expensive to tear it down. So over the years, as they've sort of recovered a little bit, they've just plastered glass on the side of it. So it looks now kind of like a finished building. But there's video of it from the time where people, and they would never allow anyone to take pictures of it. They would never allow any people to film it. A couple of people smuggled out video of it. And it's like, this collapsing disaster of a concrete structure, the ugliest building you've ever seen. It was supposed to have 10 rotating restaurants on the top of it. I mean, it was an incredible project, but the ultimate testimony of communism's failure, how this does not work. And I love it.
Who is going to pay for the bazillion-dollar rooms and the 10 revolving restaurants when no one has any money?
Yeah, I know. Well,
it's
not a good idea.
Are we going to start maybe a GoFundMe page and have Stu go to North Korea?
Oh, I'll pay for that myself. I will pay for that myself.
Start that up.
I don't understand.
Glenn Beck.
The Blaze Radio Network.
Learn from history or repeat the same mistakes. Let's go. Well, hello, America. I want to talk to you tonight about communism, and I have to tell you, I know how many people in America feel when somebody gets on TV and says, "I got to talk to you about the communist." 3 years ago, I would have made fun of people like me. I would have mocked me. I would have. Don't fall into that trap, please, tonight. Open your mind, open your ears. The country is in trouble. I don't want to believe many of the things that I believe. I think you're the same. But there are communists, believe it or not, communists. It's amazing. I thought we beat it. The best thing to ever happen to the communists was the Red Scare and Joseph McCarthy. We had beat communism. We soundly discredited it. Okay, that's what I thought when the wall came down. Joseph McCarthy, he was a joke, right? In every sense, people viewed communists in his day as traitors who wanted to destroy America. They crept into the unions, especially the teacher unions, that coupled with the colleges. Now you have a situation where communists were starting to be the ones writing and teaching our history. Now what happens? After communism fell, it was erased. We have children growing up now that don't even know what communism is. They didn't have to do what we did as kids. They didn't have to go through the emergency attack drills at school where we were like, "Why? Okay, a nuclear bomb's going to go off and what? I'm going to get under my desk for what?" They didn't have to go through duck and cover. They didn't growing up, they didn't hear about gulags. They never had to worry about the Russians. They haven't seen the horror shows of millions of mass murders and starving people at the hands of brutal communist dictators. So now it's just cool to be a communist. What difference does it make? T-shirts of Che are one of the most popular T-shirts around. Che was a racist and a mass murderer, yet we have schools banning kids from wearing American flag T-shirts on Cinco de Mayo, but Che T-shirts, cool. If we're going to ban a T-shirt, and I wouldn't ban any T-shirts, I just teach kids what's cool and what's not, I'd ban the one with the killer communist on it. It's not offensive because nobody knows the history of what these people did. How else can you explain everything that's going on today with little or no outrage? Things like a statue of Stalin going up in Virginia. See that? It's in Virginia. How does this idea not cross somebody's desk and that person say, wait. You want to put a what? Where? It happens because no one knows anymore or cares about communists. People who do know about communists, they're cool. Cameron Diaz illustrated this mindset when she visited Peru to do a TV project on Peru and its culture. While touring the country, she carried a purse emblazoned with a red star and the words, right here in Chinese, "Serve the people." It kind of caused a little bit of an outrage because it was Mao's slogan. It was a Maoist insurgency in the 1980s and 90s that killed 70,000 people in Peru. But that's a fashion bag. That's not to mention the millions, the tens of millions that people that Mao killed in China. It's not so cool when you know history, is it, Cameron? But they don't. Nobody's teaching it, and people are busy erasing it. You've got communist teachers in California calling for revolution. That's what this guy's doing. He's a teacher. In Houston, there's a branch of CPUSA. Do you even know what that is? You recognize the symbol if you're my age, Communist Party USA. They are a group calling for the nationalization of BP. Nationalization of BP, communists. Reaching out to young people through Facebook. Ah, look at that. And their favorite movie is Capitalism, a love story. Hey, that's Michael Moore. Cindy Sheehan in New Orleans talked about challenging capitalism. Listen to what she's calling for.
Any meaningful discussion of this disaster must challenge the system and structure of capitalism. If we had socialism where the companies were nationalized and the democratic control of the workers, the cleanup would have been, well, maybe they would have had an acoustic device on the blowout preventer. Maybe they would have spent the extra $500,000 to prevent this disaster, and we wouldn't have to be here.
Yeah. Or, Cindy, maybe like every other nationalist or socialist or communist country in the world, in the history of mankind, they'd already be bankrupt, and people would be living in gulags. One of the two, but I'm going to go with your happy scenario. What do you say we go with history? It's obvious we aren't paying attention to history anymore because the Communist Party had their annual convention broadcast on C-SPAN. Think about that. Half a century ago, we were rooting out communists as traitors to our Constitution and our country. Now, we're putting them on C-SPAN, and nobody says a word. How did we get here, and how do we get out? Well, we have to start listening to warnings. We've been warned before, but we didn't listen. Former Secretary of Agriculture in the 1960s, Ezra Taft Benson, warned about what was coming in a 1966 speech. He talked about a meeting that he had had with Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. How did we get here, and how do we get out? Well, we have to start listening to warnings. We've been warned before, but we didn't listen. Former Secretary of Agriculture in the 1960s, Ezra Taft Benson, warned about what was coming in a 1966 speech. He talked about a meeting that he had had with Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. Listen.
As we talked face to face, he indicated that my grandchildren would live under communism. After assuring him that I expected to do all in my power to assure that his and all other grandchildren will live under freedom, he arrogantly declared in substance, "You Americans are so gullible. No, you won't accept communism outright. But we'll keep feeding you small doses of socialism until you finally wake up and find you already have communism. We won't have to fight you. We'll so weaken your economy until you fall like overripe fruit into our hands.
I had dinner about 6-8 months ago with Mike Benson, that man's grandson. It is possible. It is possible. This man knew firsthand what was happening. And documents now show that FDR had used the Department of Agriculture as his own communist recruiting station. Documents. Henry Wallace was the secretary. This man, he was a progressive. He was supported by the Communist Party USA. He never denounced any communist support he ever received. Why would he? FDR and Wallace decided they needed to help the poor farmers who were in dire financial crisis. Their idea, well, it usually goes this way with communists, artificially raise prices. They ended up slaughtering 6 million pigs. They plowed up cotton fields and destroyed crops all over the country. This all in the middle of the worst depression we had ever had. Is it any wonder why socialism and communism ends up with people starving to death? Oh, by the way, in an unrelated note, Hugo Chavez is seizing control of the food now in Venezuela. There are now 80,000 tons of rotting food in warehouses. But pay no attention to that, because communism is cool. Have you seen my new Perth? This is why we need to know history, or else we're doomed to repeat it. So tonight I want to show you a little bit of our history. I want to show you this timeline here. This is just a scratching of the surface of what has happened in our own country with communism. First, we have to start in 1848 with Marx and Engels when they come up with the idea of Marxism. Oh, it's a great idea. It leads to the Marxist International Working Men's Association. This happened in London. In 1871, the Paris Commune, there was a riot, a Marxist riot, ended up with 30,000 people dead. In 1870, of course, the people in California say, we got to have one of them working unions for us. And so we went on. We talked a little bit about what happened last night in this area, but I want to bring you up to here. Our beloved Woodrow Wilson, that most children, and probably you until you started watching the show, knew nothing about this evil SOB. Sorry. I hate that guy. Russian Revolution in 1917. Here we have the beginnings of the Communist Working Party, Workers' Parties of America, Workers of the World Unite. Look for that slogan. It's everywhere now. In fact, Andy Stern's favorite slogan, Workers of the World Unite. What do you think he's talking about? Is it a coincidence? 1929, they changed their name to the Communist Party USA, which it is today. Now here's where we get interesting. In 1935, the communists joined the union movement. They'd all been about the workers, but this is when they really started to infiltrate. They started to go in because of FDR. I'm going to just show you a couple of highlights. We'll go over more of these later. Remember this name, Martin Dees. Remember that name. Here you have the KGB compiling the Venona Papers. Venona Papers, this was a translation of what was really going on. This was a secret spying. What was happening? KGB compiled this between 1943 and 1948. Here you see Stalin with Churchill and FDR. This is an interesting time. This is during the McCarthy era from 1950 to 1960. Mao died. Mao takes power. Stalin dies. And this man, Penn, is blacklisted. 1953, Penn, Hollywood Penn. Oh, I know his son. Way down over here, Sean Penn. Interesting. We'll get back down there in just a second. Now you have the discrediting of Joseph McCarthy. The question is, was Joseph McCarthy right? Was he right? You'll probably begin to decide that by the end of the war. Here you have, or the end of the show, here you have the Vietnam era now. You have Obama's parents meeting. Now remember, he was a communist. She was a communist. She went to the Little Red School, the Little Red Schoolhouse. Her parents went to the Little Red Church. But remember the time period that we're talking about. We're talking at the height of the Cold War. That's when William Ayres is into Marxism. That's when all of the people who are ruling now are into Marxism. Marxism wasn't cool then. Marxism isn't like it is now. If you were a Marxist then, you were a Soviet sympathizer. You were a traitor to our country. You've got to put that into perspective. It's not the same then as it is now. Here is Barack Obama's mentor, Frank Marshall Davis. He has an FBI file on his communist activities. We have the Venona papers were released in the 1980s. What did these say? In 1995 this was released. What did these papers say? Well, remember, the KGB was compiling here. They say that everything that basically this man said was right. They were happening. They were communist everywhere. And they affected everything. I'm sorry, they didn't affect. They infected absolutely everything. Here in 2000, we have Giselle with her underpants and her swimsuit of Che. We have this Marxist. Here is a very important time. Here's Michael Moore coming into the party, into the Democratic Party, sitting in the presidential box in 2004 with Jimmy Carter. That is critical that you remember that. The infiltration, the final step, come out on the stage and sit next to the president. And, of course, we have these clowns here. There's a ton that you need to know. That's how we got here. But is it who we are? Is this who we want to be? Will we even recognize that these people had an influence on it? What these people wanted to do is not a joke. Have they failed? I want you to be the judge. I want you to look at something. These are the 1963 communist goals. Okay? In 1963, I want to give you just a few of them. You tell me if they've failed. Communist goals of 1963 from the Communist Party USA. Just a few of them. Develop the illusion that disarmament of the U.S. would be a demonstration of moral strength. Isn't that what we're doing right now with our nuclear weapons? Number 15, capture one or both of the political parties. Isn't that what Michael Moore did in the presidential box? Get control of the schools and use them as transition belts for socialism and communist propaganda. Number 18, gain control of all student newspapers. 19, use student riots to foment public protest against programs which are under communist attack. Have you been watching this show? Number 20, infiltrate the press. Get control of book review assignments. Oh, you should see the reviews on my books. Editorial writing, policy-making decisions. 21, gain control of key positions in radio, TV, and movies. 27, infiltrate the churches and replace revealed religion with social religion. 1963 communist goals. Revealed religion replaced with social religion. 28, no prayer in schools because it violates separation of church and state. Do you know that in New Haven, they just took out in their diplomas the year of our Lord? They just did it because it's offensive. 29, discredit the Constitution by calling it inadequate, old-fashioned, a hindrance to cooperation between nations on a worldwide basis. That's about to happen, that last part. Number 30, discredit the American founding fathers. Please, what are we doing on this show? Trying to restore them. 36, infiltrate and gain control of more unions. 37, infiltrate and gain control of big businesses. What do you think the Tides Foundation is? Number 40, discredit the family as an institution. Encourage promiscuity and easy divorce. Let me ask you a question. These are the goals from 1963. This is 1791. Which one? Which one, America? It's a charter of negative liberties, says our president. Which one? You must choose.
You Americans are so gullible No, you won't accept communism outright. But we'll keep feeding you small doses of socialism until you finally wake up and find you already have communism. We won't have to fight you. We'll so weaken your economy until you fall like overripe fruit into our hands.
Are we here? We were warned that the communists were not going to go away. They were just getting started. Ezra Taft Benson knew that serious threat. He saw it firsthand. He knew communists were in the government. He knew they were in the government. You know who this is, right? This is Joseph McCarthy. You know who he is. Do you know who this guy is? Do you know this guy? Ever heard of him? How about him? Boy, you should, America. These people were communist spies. Let me read their positions. This is Harry Dexter here. He worked for the Treasury Secretary Morgenthau. Recognize that name? Probably not. Probably haven't been taught. Morgenthau. FDR. This is Alger Hiss. You might have heard that name before. He worked in the Department of Agriculture. Gee, Department of Agriculture. That's Ezra Taft Benson. He worked in the Department of Agriculture. He was also in committees of DOJ, the State Department. This is Lori Curry here. He worked in the Treasury Department, assistant to the president. I'd say there's probably some pretty good intel there. Do you think? In 1938, the House Committee on Un-American Activities was formed. 1938. Not by this guy, but by this guy. Martin Dies. He's a Democrat. Did you know that? 1938. Not him, him. In fact, all the things that he wrote into the president later, Joseph McCarthy, all of these things came from him. But this guy had credibility. So they just pushed it all aside. They stonewalled him. What they say about McCarthy? Oh, he's conducting witch hunts, smearing innocent victims, spreading hysteria. On February 11th, 1950, McCarthy wrote this telegram to the president, President Truman, in which he explained, I have in my possession the names of 57 communists who are in the State Department at present. He got the information here. A couple of years ago, I put this book down. It came in when it was brand new, maybe 2-3 years ago, I don't know when. And I don't know how much I read, probably read about this much. And then I read some of the footnotes and everything else. And I put it down. And the reason why I put it down is because I don't want to believe this. I don't want to believe it. I put it down and I went, I'm not ready to hear that. I can't handle that, okay? Please, America, please read this book. I'm going to introduce you to the author of this book. He's, what is he, 80? 75? He's been looking into this. He wrote this book to prove his grandmother wrong because Grandma said, he's telling the truth. He went and tried to find the documents to prove his grandmother wrong. It didn't end up that way. History that isn't taught, and you are going to be the only one able to teach it. You must know it. I'll introduce you to this gentleman next.
It's about 9 million degrees in New York today. Don't bother going outside. Just eat a lot of ice cream and get a copy of The Overton Window. You don't even have to leave your house. Just go to glennbeck.com/books and order it. Or download the ebook.
Communism has a happy face. It's a fashion statement. Call somebody a communist and it's a joke. But as you've seen tonight, from Hollywood to class to the Oval Office, Marxism is alive and well. It is thriving here in the United States. You might know what it is, but our children do not. We just think that somehow or another they know, but they do not. and they are not being taught the evil of communism and socialism. Progressives do know what it means, and they can mutate it. It always mutates. It goes undercover. Vladimir Putin was a lieutenant colonel. There he is. KGB. Artists who portray him negatively, people handing out anti-Putin information, have been arrested by Secret Service police now. Other opponents, like former KGB agent Alexander Levinko, mysteriously gets poisoned. How? Putin now has videos made glorifying him. He's pictured riding shirtless on his horseback. The guy was a KGB agent. Where was the turning point? I believe America's turning point was Joseph McCarthy. And again, with the Berlin Wall falling down. Joseph McCarthy was so discredited, it made it almost into a joke. And when the Berlin Wall fell down, we beat it. And so now we disregarded it. Well, here we go again, down the same road. I want to bring in M. Stanton Evans. He is the author of Blacklisted by History, the untold story of Senator Joe McCarthy. What an honor to meet you, sir.
The honor is mine.
Do you remember I called you maybe 3 years ago?
3 years.
3 years ago? And
2007.
And I said, I can't even finish your book. I can't. Remember that?
I did.
I said, I don't want to believe this stuff, and I wanted to find out if you were a crackpot or not, because I didn't want to fill my head full of crackpot stuff. Sure. And we had a conversation.
We did.
Tell me, America, this is such an important turning point. Tell me, when you went to go look for the documents on Joseph McCarthy, what did you find or not find?
I found a lot of stuff missing, a lot of stuff that had been censored, a lot of stuff that was in the records in one place but blacked out in another place. Mostly what I found was that the FBI files, which backed up what McCarthy was saying, had been withheld for 50 years. And we now have them, or many of them, and they show essentially that he was right in general. There was a massive penetration of the government, and that it was covered up, and that he threatened that cover-up. And that's why he was isolated, demonized, and destroyed. Right. That's the technique.
Okay. Tell me about Dyes, because he was a Democrat.
He was the precursor of McCarthy in the sense that he investigated the same things. He was doing it at a time, he was a Democrat, he was the chairman of a committee. He was doing it at a time, mostly in World War II, when the Soviet Union was our ally. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people just didn't pay any attention to him. I mean, I have those hearings, they're very fine hearings. But a lot of the information that McCarthy later had, Dyes did not have. He did not have direct access to the FBI stuff. I'm not sure McCarthy did either, but McCarthy had more stuff coming into him.
And McCarthy was, I mean, he was just an imperfect vessel, or was he not? Was he clean? Was he just completely...
He was imperfect, as we all are.
Yeah, yeah.
He made his mistakes, but he was telling the truth.
Okay.
And the truth was huge. It was so huge. We turned out the big lie, Hitler, and so there's also a big truth. A truth so big that people can't believe it.
Right.
And that's kind of what you're saying.
That's why I didn't want to read this, because it changes your focus. And nobody wants to, I mean... Gosh, nobody wants to believe that there were people in our government that were bad. You can believe in individuals, but you can't believe this mass kind of, this cover-up.
There were hundreds of them.
You showed me a document. Can you bring this again? Yes. Tell me what this document is. This, America, will horrify you.
This is, what this is, Glenn, is a record of the so-called Yalta Conference. This is long before McCarthy came along. This is 1945, where Churchill and Roosevelt met with Stalin at Yalta, which is a resort on the Black Sea in the Crimea. And this is the transcript of what, or minutes of what happened at that meeting. An official version of this was published, but the paragraph that I'm going to, maybe I'll give it to you to read, is about Roosevelt is saying to Stalin and Churchill that he is going to meet with the King of Saudi Arabia after this conference, King Saud. And Stalin asked him, does he intend to make any concessions to King Saud of Saudi Arabia? And I'll let you read what the answer is where the arrow is.
The president replied that there was only one concession he thought he might offer, and that was to give him the 6 million Jews in the United States.
Yes. That
Where is this? Is a collection? Where is this from?
That is from the papers of Edward Stettinius, who was the Secretary of State at the time of Yalta. Those papers are at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. That paragraph.
What does he mean by he'd give?
Well, one might think that he was a closet anti-Semite, but I think it also suggests that maybe he was a little bit gaga.
This is at the end of. This is real close to the end of.
He died 2 months after Yalta, and so he was. There are many other indications that he was out of it at Yalta, but that is one of the clearest ones, and that is edited. That's no longer in the official records.
Okay.
You have to go to the archives to find that.
How surprised were you when you first started doing research on how much has been edited and buried? We don't even know who we are.
I'm going in was not exactly naive, but I got to say, I have something I call Evans' law of inadequate paranoia, which says that no matter how bad you think something is, when you look into it, it's always worse. And this has been totally vindicated. Every time I turn around, I'm finding something else that makes me say, I can't believe it. I'm like you, I can't believe this. Right. I didn't believe that.
I want to take you next. We're gonna take a break, and then I'm gonna come back because some people will say that's ancient history. Yeah, sure. You'll discredit the founders, but something that happened in 1948 or 1950 is ancient history. Let's go to today, and we have the timeline here. Show me what is being affected now. The same things that happened then that are happening now. Hang on, we'll be back in just a second.
Yeah.
America, I am with M. Stanton Evans. I'm looking for the book. I don't know where I put it. So are you related to M. Night Shyamalan? No? No. Blacklisted by History, The Untold Story of Senator Joe McCarthy. Please get this book. How old is this, M?
It came out in 2007.
Okay. It is, it's frightening. It's frightening, but it is the truth. And here's why you need to know history, because it is repeating itself. And I want to talk a little bit about the parallels between the Obama administration and the FDR administration as it comes into play with communists. We have Marxists, Maoists, communists in and around the White House, influencing and actually working with. We had that with FDR. Both denied it at the time. Yes or no?
Well, you know a lot more about what's happening now than I do. I tell people if it happened after 1954, I don't know anything about it. I'm stuck in the 50s doing this stuff. But I've listened to you, and I know you know a lot about this. But I know what happened back then, and there are a lot of similarities. And one of the things that is similar is this use of a crisis to railroad every kind of radical thing possible that otherwise would never be feasible. You couldn't get it done.
Were they denying in the FDR? They denied that there were any communists in there.
Well, they did. They went different ways. One of the things that happened was, remember, World War II. The Soviet Union was our big ally.
Right.
And they had a doctrine then called mere membership in the Communist Party. I mean, just a communist. So what's the problem here? And
kind of like what we have now.
A little bit. And I have a chapter on this called the witching hour, which meant when the witches were there. And they looked at the government back then and said, you know, the problem with this government, there are not enough communists in it. We need to go out and get more communists. So they had kind of like an affirmative action program for communists. And so they flooded into the government, particularly these temporary wartime agencies, the Office of Strategic Services, Office of War Information, and then those guys at the end of the war were dumped into the State Department. And that's where all the most of the McCarthy cases came from. They came from those agencies. So there was definitely the cover of the crisis and the domestic problems, and also in that case, the war became the pretext for putting these people in the government. And so the parallels to what you're talking about are there.
Okay. Let me talk to you about this man, Cass Sunstein.
Yes.
I think, I've said, and nobody in the press, you know, they don't even question why I even say this. They just discredit me for it. I think he's the most dangerous man in America. Would you agree?
Well, again, what I know about him, I know from you mostly. I listened to you talk about Sunstein, and you may what little hair I've got left stand on end. And so
he's been watching the show. He's actually only 30 years old.
Right, I wish. But anyway, Sunstein, the way you talked about this requiring links of internet, you know, to the other side.
He talks about going and infiltrating and discrediting. And
I listened to every word you said about that, and I said, this is because, and one of many things about it, to exactly parallel the silencing part to a document that is almost 50 years old called the Reuther Memorandum, which was issued back in the Kennedy era, authored by a man named Victor Reuther, who was the brother of Walter Reuther, one of the people that I think you've been looking at with some interest. And this was basically how to silence conservatives in all departments of our life, but particularly on the airwaves. And out of that came the Fairness Doctrine, which said, in essence, that if you put on the air a program by a conservative that is paid, you then have to put on an equal time program free for the opposite point of view. Very similar to what you read from that gentleman. And that was 1963.
All right. I want to come back because here's Cass Sunstein on conspiracy theories. This is Communism Un-American. And a new article that just came out, The Anatomy of a Smear. We'll do that next. We have so much to go over and so little time as usual. I mean, these are the Venona papers. This is top secret from, this is KGB stuff. We have to go over this. We have so much. We're going to have to come back another day. But I wanted to stop here because if anybody believes in any of this stuff, I can guarantee you, and you know it to be true, because I've said, read this book. Immediately, I will be a conspiracy theorist. I will be, you know, you name it. You've lived it your whole life.
Well,
there is a
not entirely yet.
There is this article came out in Town Hall magazine, and it's on me, and it's called "The Anatomy of a Smear: How the Left is Fighting to Silence Glenn Beck." And it is amazing. It's written by Meredith Jessup. It is an amazing article. The only article that I've read that actually uses the facts and say, no, here's what happened, here's how they used it. This is a system, and they have done it to people in that entire timeline there.
Well, you're so right. It's happened both domestically and in foreign policy. Anti-communist leaders like Mihailovich in Yugoslavia, Chiang Kai-shek in China, and others were delegitimized by this very same technique. A Soviet agent named James Klugman was responsible for sending back to Churchill this information that Mihailovich, who was the anti-communist in Yugoslavia, was no good. He was collaborating with the Nazis, and only Tito was fighting against the Nazis. Completely false. Churchill cut off Mihailovich. They gave all their aid to Tito. Yugoslavia goes communist. Soviet agent named Solomon Adler, sitting in Chongqing, China in 1944, sending back similar reports about Chiang Kai-shek. Chiang Kai-shek is not fighting the Japanese. He's a collaborator. Only the communists are fighting the Japanese. Well, then cut off Chiang Kai-shek, give the aid to the communists. China falls to the communists. It's a pattern.
It's over and over again. America, just have no fear. Have no fear. Know the truth. The truth shall set you free. It's going to make you miserable first, but the truth shall set you free. Thank you, sir. God bless you.